Hello, Prof. My name is Muthukumar, and today I'll be sharing my 4 key takeaways from the software project management module. So, throughout the semester, we have analyzed many projects and analyzed why they have been successful and why they have been failures. So, after understanding all of these concepts, I'd highlight some of the key takeaways that I would like to apply at my workplace. So, the first key takeaway will be about gathering requirements and scoping these requirements. Gathering requirements and ensuring that they are clear is very important as this will ensure that the project is set in the right direction. We will be able to ensure that stakeholders are aligned on the key objectives, and this will essentially enable the project to be a huge success. So when we are starting to gathering requirements, we can ask some important questions, especially related to the 5 Ws. Who are the stakeholders? Who are the parties that will be affected by this project? When is the deadline? This will help us to analyze the requirements and to check whether we can meet the deadlines. Where will the project be implemented? This will help us to plan the resources. What are the requirements? And this basically help us to understand the features involved. And finally, why the project needs to be implemented. So this is the most important question, as understanding this will help us to appreciate the reason behind the projects being implemented and how it will help its users. So after gathering all these requirements, what we need to do is we need to scope these requirements. So we can scope these requirements into 3 types. Firstly, we have system requirements. System requirements are basically requirements that track the performance of the system. This can be security of the system, data validation, and basically this ensures the system is able to perform up to this most efficient form. Secondly, we have user requirements. User requirements relates to features that users need in order for the application to work. It can be user requested for some screens, user requested for some applications, some interfaces. So these are features that will help users in their day-to-day tasks. And thirdly, we have business requirements. Business requirements actually ensure that the application's performance actually aligns with the business use cases. For example, how much profit is needed, or what are some requirements that business needs for the application to be successful. So what we understand from this segment is how we should gather requirements, how we should scope these requirements. As this is very important for any project to be successful. Because throughout this project, we have looked at many different projects which were failures because requirements were not gathered properly and stakeholders were not happy with the end product. So I hope that by gathering requirements, I will be able to gather requirements more effectively in my workplace and ensure that everyone is aligned on the project's objectives. I'll now go on to my second point, which is about risk mitigation. So as most of us know, any large project can have a lot of risks, either it be technological delays, tight deadlines, and we need to ensure that we can manage these risks. So one of the simple things you can do is try applying the Moscow principle, which is must have, should have, could have, and won't have. This will allow us to prioritize features to focus on those that must be implemented. Secondly, we should be aware of scope creep, where users come up with additional requirements, especially towards the end of our development, and we find that we are actually rushing for deadlines and we won't be able to address these. Or even worse, actually address these end up that we don't end up meeting the deadlines. So what we need to make sure is that ensure the requirements are simple, or even better, follow the KISS principle, which is keep it simple and stupid. By following all of this, we will actually find that we will be able to meet the deadline. Another thing we can do to mitigate this risk is to do prototyping, where we take our final proposed solution and just try to implement a small version of it. So what would happen is once we implement a small version, firstly everyone in our team will be aware of the processes, aware of their roles, and secondly we can actually observe how the system would be expected to work. We can find what are the advantages, perhaps enhance them, find what are the disadvantages or issues and try to fix them. And even more, we can show the stakeholders these prototypes so that they have better understanding of the system, and even they can highlight some key issues that we can fix. So this is my second key takeaway, how to mitigate risk. And I believe that by applying these principles in my workplace, I'll be able to handle risk more efficiently. Let's move on to the third point. The third point which I found very interesting was the different models available in the market for project management to consider when implementing their projects. So some of the models we went through were Agile and Waterfall. So Agile is an iterative process where through sprints, teams will be developing the features, and after each sprint, teams will be able to review the feature, see whether it actually met the requirements, and perhaps do some minor adjustments. So this is a stark contrast to waterfall. What happens in waterfall is once requirements are signed off, we following a very linear phase from planning to development to testing, and usually these phases we won't be able to go back. So this will be really not be beneficial to companies that they feel that their requirements need to be revisited constantly. So when I was looking through these two models, I understand that actually these two models help organizations in different ways. Waterfall model will be more helpful for organizations who clearly know what their requirements are and they know that the requirements cannot be changed. Hence, they can go forward with the waterfall model. Else, if organizations feel like, hey, I need to be a bit more iterative and I have the scope to go and look through requirements again, they can gladly go with the agile model. In fact, there are many different models applicable in the workplace, and I believe that by analyzing all of this, I'm able to understand the advantages and disadvantages of each. Now let's move on to my final key takeaway, which is the work breakdown structure, or basically how we should plan a project. So the work breakdown structure, what happens is we'll be analyzing the project and we're breaking down the very simple components. This effectively so that when we do that, we're able to allocate tasks more efficiently to individual teams. By breaking down the components, we know like what feature needs to be implemented and who should implement it. And we can plan this using different tools. So in the lecture, we actually use monday.com, which actually uses Gantt chart to plan all these tasks. So what happens is by after taking all the tasks, we can actually allocate different time frame for each of them, and most importantly, connect two tasks together using dependencies. As we know, usually a lot of tasks would have dependencies on one another, and say some tasks need to be completed before some can begin. So I believe by actually planning these tasks in one whole frame, we can actually have a very big picture of what's be expected of the project. So once we have planned out the task, we can perhaps play around with the timing to ensure that we can meet most of the deadlines. So I found that this is very important as we move on in our career. We will be expected to plan tasks and we need to be comfortable in doing so. So these are my four key takeaways from this module. We have actually looked at very different projects and why they were successful, why they were failed. There be the I6 project, the NP-FIT program, or the NHS program. So I hope that by analyzing these four key takeaways, we can understand why these projects fail and perhaps we don't replicate them in our own projects. Thank you and have a nice day.